On this edition of the Sports Buffet podcast, I went back with Clay Nunley. If you're looking for someone who's got integrity, honesty, you don't have to go any further than Salem, Roanoke College, and visit Clay Nunley. Clay Nunley talks about his coaching influences, his playing influences, and much, much more. Here's Clay Nunley on the Sports Buffet podcast. He jokingly said he hopes he can remember all the past at his age, but I have a feeling Clay Nunley is going to do just fine. He is the head coach at Roanoke, former coach at Randolph. When did you know you wanted to be a coach?
In college. I got to college thinking maybe I wanted to look into a career in sports broadcasting. I knew I wanted to stay in athletics in some capacity, and I thought sports broadcasting might be intriguing. I was a communications major. But really, Bob, the more my college basketball experience was a good one. I had some great teammates, and I began to really value the relationships I had with those guys. And I think what resonated with me was just, these relationships when you're on a team. I mean, that's a unique bond that you build with the guys you're with. And I just felt like, that this is one of the things that I really love about this experience are these relationships. And I don't know how else you get that in other walks of life. And so sports broadcasting maybe keeps me in the sports realm, but it really doesn't put you in the heart of what I loved about my experience playing in college. And so I felt like coaching would be the next best thing. And so about sophomore, junior year of college is when I really decided maybe that was what I wanted to do.
You talked about being a communications major. Is there one thing in communications that you liked the least?
That I liked the least?
Yes.
Oh, gosh. We're going back a ways.
Well, I'll tell you why I asked that. I hear a lot of people say they have a fear of public speaking.
That didn't bother me. I was okay there. I was not the best writer, and so I really had to be challenged in some ways there that weren't always comfortable for me because that was not a strength. But public speaking, I'm not saying I was good at it, but I was not scared off by it.
When do you think you became "quote unquote" okay with public speaking?
With public speaking, I go back. I was. Gosh, you have to go back. Elementary school, we had these different contests and classes where, you'd have to give a speech about educating the audience on a topic, and I think I spoke about the sport of soccer. I was a soccer player at the time, and I ended up I won for my class. I competed in a regional competition. I didn't win, but that was my first time doing some public speaking, and I felt okay with it. So it was never something that really struck a fear with me.
When you were growing up, were you a gym rat, or were you addicted to any sport that came on TV, or how would you describe young Clay growing up?
I played a lot of sports. I don't know if I was very good at any of them, but I played a lot of them. So I played football. I played baseball. I swam some. I played a little bit of tennis, and then of course basketball. Played soccer the most when I was growing up. That was the sport when I was in 7, 8, 9 that I probably played as much as any. And then that kind of faded out, and basketball took over. And by the time I hit middle school, it was pretty much basketball was the primary focus.
If I said to you, "What's your favorite part about basketball?" What is it?
Well, specific to basketball,
as
as a player,
yes.
well, I was considered a shooter, and so I always, I just loved getting on a court, with a ball and a hoop, and just spending an hour or two getting shots up. I mean, that was fun for me. So as a player, we all probably gravitate to our strengths, and for me, that was what I was comfortable doing.
Do kids do that enough nowadays, you think, as a whole?
I think what's different now compared to earlier, it can be good and bad depending on how it gets used. There's a much greater presence level of trainers now.
Right.
When I was younger, there weren't very many trainers. It was like, you could learn from guys who were older than you, who went through what you did. You could learn from some good coaches, and then you took what you learned and you applied it to your game and you worked on your game. Now you've got a lot of trainers. That can be a good thing if a trainer knows what he or she is doing. But I also think, one, you got to make sure the trainer knows what they're talking about, because there's a lot of self-proclaimed experts. And then I think the second part is sometimes the presence of the trainer makes a player think, well, if he's getting in the gym when the trainer tells him to get in the gym, then he's working. But if the trainer only tells him to get in the gym and they get together twice a week, Tuesday and Friday, and that's the only time he gets in the gym, he's probably really not working, not like he could be or should be. So, to me, I've always felt like get with a trainer if the trainer knows what they're talking about, but don't just expect the workouts with the trainer to be your only time that you're getting into the gym. Like, let that complement the rest of the time that you get in the gym on your own, really being productive to work on your game. So I think that's different.
Who was your biggest influence when you were playing besides somebody that you were related to?
Uh, Biggest influence. I grew up in Charlottesville, and
Okay.
so I was right in the shadow of the University of Virginia. So I was a big Virginia fan when I was a kid. So there were so many players that came through that program that I was a big fan of. Richard Morgan, Bryant Stith, John Crotty. I mean, those were guys from my childhood. Obviously Ralph Sampson, but I mean, everybody knew Ralph, and that was when I was 5, 6 years old. But there were a lot of Virginia players that really, and then I would go to camp there, and every once in a while players would come back through. Tom Sheehy, Rick Carlisle, those guys would come back through, and that would always be a thrill when you were a young kid to just be around those guys. I still have a picture at my house, and I think I was 10, so this would have been 1986. And it's a picture with Terry Holland, the former Virginia coach, and Rick Carlisle, who had just graduated and was, I think, in his second year playing with the Celtics. But obviously, everybody probably who now follows the NBA knows he's the head coach of the Indiana Pacers and won an NBA title with the Mavericks. So, yeah, those were the guys that made the biggest impression on me.
I'll give you a quick funny story. When my kids were growing up, they got a children's book called No One Noticed Ralph, and it was about a parrot that people didn't pay attention to. Well, certainly people paid attention to the UVA center that was over 7 foot tall. Everyone noticed that Ralph.
Absolutely, no question.
You talked about having the influences. Who are influences in the other sports? I mean, I don't want to say did you care, but you talked about you didn't play those sports maybe as long and as hard, except soccer, I did hear. But who were influences in other sports?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to think about that one because
Because soccer
you
wasn't
know,
what it is now, by the way.
yeah, it's grown. But I would have to think about that one. Probably the first one that comes to mind, going back to the Virginia ties, is they had a quarterback named two quarterbacks. Don Mikowski,
Hmm.
he went by the Magic Man, went on to play for the Green Bay Packers and started for them before he got beat out by some guy named Brett Favre. And then Sean Moore.
Yep.
Sean Moore was the quarterback when they were ranked number one in 1990, and was from Martinsville and was a Heisman Trophy candidate. Finished fourth, I think, in the voting,
Yep.
and was just a heck of a player. And so those two guys brought some success to Virginia football that Virginia football hadn't had. And so, I was big fans of those guys.
Coaching influences.
Well, so going back to my first one, I talked about going to the Virginia basketball camp. I had a connection with Terry Holland, and he was the first, probably, first influence on me in my younger stages, to the point where um, he got out of coaching at the age of 50 or 49, I think, and went on to get into athletic administration as an AD, at first at Davidson, then at Virginia, and then at East Carolina. But he was always, whenever I made a coaching decision career-wise, he was always one of those few guys that, I needed to make sure I talked to, just to bounce it off of him and get his thoughts and feedback. And I'll tell you a quick story. He was great for me. I was at Wright State. That was my first job, and I loved it there. It was a great place. I was really blessed to be with some tremendous coaches. who took me under their wing and helped me to grow. And I had a chance to take a job at Army, and I was offered an assistant position. The coach there had just been hired by the name of Jim Cruz. He was a longtime Evansville coach, had a great track record of success, was really highly regarded. So this was a unique opportunity, but it was at a place that didn't have a lot of success. I mean, people knew how hard the job was at Army. It was a military academy, and most people, when you would explain, okay, hey, do you stay at Wright State or do you take the job at Army? They would immediately say you stay at Wright State. That's a better job. It's a bigger program, more high-profile league. It just makes more sense to stay there. And so as I was offered the job and was considering it, I was torn. And so I called Coach Holland, and he gave me some great advice. He listened to the situation, and then he said to me, he said, I think you should take the job. And he was one of the very few people to say that. And he said it for two reasons. The first reason was he knew Jim Cruz, and he had a lot of respect for Jim Cruz as a coach. And he just felt like I would learn a tremendous amount. And he was not wrong. Like that was, Wright State was getting my college degree as a coach. Then Army was getting my doctorate as a coach. I mean, I just learned so much in that experience. And so he was right about that. But the second thing he said that was also prophetic was, he said, you're going to learn how to, you're going to learn one of the most valuable lessons you can have in coaching, and that's how to learn learn how to win with less talent. And he said, you can have a job where you can have great players and great talent, but you're always going to have other teams out there who have just as much or more talent, and you can't simply rely on trying to be better from a talent standpoint. And he talked about, being in the ACC. He said when we had Ralph Sampson, of course, we could win some games on talent, but then all of a sudden you're playing North Carolina, who's got Michael Jordan and Sam Perkins. You're playing NC State, who's got Chris Washburn. You're playing Maryland, who's got Lynn Bias. He said, and there were so many nights when we didn't have that we were less talented than the teams that we were playing, and so we had to find ways to schematically and culturally gain an advantage, and that was so proved to be so true for me. In those 5 years at Army, we were in the Patriot League, and it was a really competitive league that had just gone scholarship, which made things even harder for the academies, and so we struggled at times. We grew, though. We did have some success eventually, and in part was because you had to learn how to overcome these challenges that you were faced with.
What type of military commitment was there with Army?
It was 5 years when you got out.
How tough did that make it to recruit?
Well, what made it toughest was once we got there, 6 months later, we went back into Iraq for the second time.
Okay.
So now on the news is the broadcast of the fact that we're back at war, so to speak, and I think that understandably might make families nervous and uneasy, what that might mean for their child and so forth. So but the experience was great. It was invaluable, and made a tremendous impact on me, and I have great memories of my time there.
You just heard from Clay Nunley on the Sports Buffet podcast. Coach Nunley is the head coach at Roanoke College. You'll hear more going back with him, and you'll also hear closer to the season, Clay Nunley will play the name game, where he will talk about some guys that he may have coached or coached against. How do you find out who Clay Nunley is going to talk about? You keep listening to the Sports Buffet podcast with Bob Alvis.